This week, Pastor Rick sits in the host seat as we talk about cancel culture and continue our series through 1 Peter. Welcome to the 167.
Hey, welcome back to the 167. I'm Pastor Rick, and I have the privilege of hosting today because we had the privilege of hearing Pastor Lucas bring the message at New Life this past weekend. So good job, and welcome to that side of the table on the 167.
I know. And all this talk about privilege, I mean, that's kind of, are we diving into the culture with that?
Well, we just go right off the high dive.
It's like this side of the table privilege?
Yeah, well, it does have... I don't know what it has, but it has something. So, let's jump right into the message. So, you were talking about the big topic of
Cancel culture.
Cancel culture.
Yeah,
I've not heard of that before. So, what exactly is that?
Cancel culture is, I think I used the definition in the message of, it's this mentality and culture when someone says something that is deemed unacceptable, and then they are, we talked about being ostracized, boycotted, or just kind of
Shunned.
Yeah. So, and I pointed out, I think that is an important thing because people are like, oh, I got canceled. I'm like, no, you didn't. Like, were you put out of business? Were you fired? Do your parents not want to talk to you anymore? Like, it's usually an extreme thing rather than just a bullying.
Yeah. So when you think of culture in general, how do you see people being canceled, and what are people being canceled about? Like, what are some of the big things right now?
Yeah, I mean, just a few things. I think that it originally started with, of course, it's easy to call somebody a bigot. Like, whether or not you actually did. And I love, there's a couple of things that I read that they talked about all the things that got canceled in like 2020 and things like that. And it really started out as this thing where it's whatever is perceived as something that is outside culture, if it's, perceived racism or it's perceived bigotry towards the LGBTQ community, anything like that, that all of a sudden your life gets difficult. People bully you online. You have to come off social media. You might lose your job over it. Like, we saw that one clip, this is a while back, where the lady was in the park and like something about like the guy said he was going to go after her dog, and so she called the police.
Yeah.
But like she said, oh, it's a black man, and so it became this like, and she lost her job over an internet video. I mean, like, the company like disowned her, and so I think you're seeing people get canceled for, anything that's deemed outside the norm. If you get put on the internet, like either with the clip or maybe it's out of context or maybe you deserved it, but I think you're basically getting punished for being outside of whatever is the social norm at the time, the hot topic.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is that social norm isn't just what has been in the past is you have a belief that's different than my belief. Mm-hmm. And you're going to make some lifestyle choices that are different than what I believe are biblical lifestyle choices. And though I don't agree with you, and I will tell you that I think it's wrong, you still have the freedom to make those choices because we live in America and we value the freedom that we have in America. Like,
Sure.
That's a choice.
Yeah.
And you can make that choice, but I don't agree with that choice.
Yeah.
It's shifted from that to we live in a country that gives me the freedom to make those choices, and now you have to agree with me. You don't have the freedom any longer to disagree, because if you disagree and if you don't celebrate and if you don't support, then now you're a bigot, now you're hateful, and we attack you. And is that kind of what you see is...
It really went from leave me alone to now I can't leave you alone.
Okay.
And
yeah.
so, and I don't know what's at the core of that. If it's anger, I don't know if it's at the core, because you're seeing some very hateful things go on in our culture. And so I don't know if it's just impatience or intolerance. Like, it's a very, very strange shift in our culture, but you're really seeing that. You're seeing people, you saw sometimes a couple years ago in the summertime, It went from like, oh yeah, like you should punch a Nazi to throw a milkshake on a Nazi, and then they were filming milkshakes with Quickcrete and hitting people with bricks. And I'm just like, how do you even get to that point as a human being that you're willing to throw a brick at somebody because they disagree with you? It's crazy.
Yeah, culture, again, it's moving very, very quickly. Changes are happening. Every day it seems like there's something new. It's just it's sped up in the process.
And it's weird because I feel like where it's being perpetuated in culture is there's this simultaneous move to tear down social norms. So you're rewarded for being outside of what is a traditional social norm, and then if you actually adhere to the social norm, now you're the
you're the bad guy, or
you're the bad guy, and then you need to be canceled.
And again, we'll jump into some specific questions, but what's odd to me and very intriguing on a spiritual level is that the majority holds to a pretty traditional lifestyle, conservative, not politically conservative, but a more conservative lifestyle. The huge minority is that other, that whatever that lifestyle might be. And yet what's portrayed because of social media in the accessibility of all the information through Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever, it seems like it's the opposite. It seems like, those alternate lifestyles are the majority and you're in the minority, which is not the case.
Oh, absolutely. And you and I are old enough to remember.
I appreciate you saying that kind of we're peers.
Yes, we absolutely.
Okay.
I just happen to be old enough to remember when, I think, was it called Prop 8 in California, as state by state, you got to vote whether or not they recognize gay marriage. So it was nationally accepted that you could have a common law marriage kind of a thing, a partnership, legally binding contract with a homosexual partner. And so in California, which is by far one of the most liberal states in the United States, they voted and said, no, we're liberal, we're great, we're going to vote on whether or not we can call this homosexual marriage, that it's just going to be the same thing. And it was 70-30 against that. Yeah. It was 70% of the most liberal state in America said, no, marriage should be between a man and a woman. And then everybody just went, yeah, we're not going to do that. And we're going to shove it down your throats. And if you don't like it, you're a bigot. And I'm going, there was no sensitivity to like, hey, for thousands of years, this has kind of been the case. Maybe you should let people kind of, like it's that thing of going, well, we have to punish you rather than sympathize with you, rather than come alongside you and go, like, even if you're on the liberal side of this and go, hey, we're going to change this fundamental right in culture. And we want to walk through that with you. It was like, well, just shut up. And, like, it was just like, we're not even going to, we don't care.
Yeah. Let's bring it specifically back to, we're in this sermon series, kind of working our way through 1 Peter. And so in 1 Peter chapter 3, the text that you used for this past weekend, what are the specific conflicts that you see in cancel culture as opposed to God's culture here in 1 Peter chapter 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think reading it, like I have it in front of me here, I think it's the tone of it, because if he calls us and he says, finally, brothers, have unity of mind, which I think is actually the essence of cancel culture. It's like, we want you to have, we want us all to be unified, and I'll put a gun to your head so that you'll be unified with me. But then he goes on to say sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. And that was like just the example I picked. It's not just to pick on that example and say like, oh, if you're right wing, you're good, and if you're left wing, you're bad. It's that mentality of going, nobody sat down and was like, hey, let's sympathize a little bit with that. This is going to be hard for people to accept. Mm-hmm. Can we sit down as, believers in Christ, and somebody says, I feel like I'm transgender, that you can go, oh my gosh, that must be horrible. That must be horrible to feel like you don't fit in your own skin. Like that's awful. Yeah. What can I do to help you? Like how can I sympathize with you? And whereas cancel culture on both the right and the left is, and sometimes coming from churches, is, well, you've stepped out of the boundaries of what I think is normal, and therefore I cut you out of my life. Like we can't talk anymore. I'm unfriending you. I'm blocking you. Like you saw that happen with tons of things, even in COVID. People ended up on the wrong side of whatever issue on COVID, and it was like now we are no longer speaking.
Yeah, so it has shifted from a place of unity to a place of divisiveness.
Yeah.
And-
Well, and when he goes on to say, "Don't pay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless," I'm going, that's exactly what's happening in our culture. Is it's like, well, if you hate me, then I hate you.
Yeah. And so, kind of jumping into that, diversity for a little while now has been kind of a popular word. It's a hot word in culture to be diverse. We've had, you go back several years and companies started having diversity training because, they wanted to educate people on all the differences of people. So, how does diversity relate to God's heart of unity? Like, is diversity evil? Is it good? Is unity better? Like, how do these things work together?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it, a pastor friend of mine likes to use the example of if you made brownies and you put a little bit of poop in it, how much poop is.
Yeah, I heard that before.
Yeah, it's wisdom. But I mean, like, I think that's what's happening in culture right now is we'll use a word and then change it. Even the word woke, like we've been talking about this, where it used to be like it was this call to Black and African American, people to be like, hey, be aware of what's happening. And then it gets just a little bit of, poop gets sprinkled in and it alters what's happening. It gets put into a soup. And like we talked about robots this week, but like diversity, it's no longer diversity. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And equity is the word that you kind of have to pay attention to, because everybody's like, I love diversity. And it's like, well, that's great. Like, diversity. And it's like, yeah, but now we have to punish people so that it's equitable. And that's a very, socialistic thing to do. It's a very fairness-oriented thing to do. And Christianity is not fairness-oriented. It's grace-oriented.
Right.
And so I just think that I think that diversity is fantastic, but it's then what gets put in the soup,
Yeah, diversity, if everyone was exactly the same, like in our personality, in our styles, and our likes and dislikes, it would not be a reflection of the creativity of God. Yet, it's what brings us together. That diversity is what brings us together and allows us to then have shared experiences in the unity of our faith, in our support of righteousness and holiness, and that unity of mind that you mentioned earlier, right? That's centered on the unchanging, the foundational truth of God's word, of who God, the essence of God.
Right.
And so it does not change. Like, our experiences have all changed, but the unity that, no, this is what we believe. The Apostles' Creeds and, some of those things that this is what we believe, and it's what unites us.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point because it's the artistry of God. Like, if you can imagine like going to somebody's house and every painting in their house was blue, and like some of the content was a little bit questionable, and you'd be looking at them going, why do you have this painting? And they're like, because it's blue. I love blue. And you're like, yeah, but this is a pretty graphic representation of something that I don't agree with. They're like, yeah, but it's a blue painting. And I'm going, does God look at us that way where we're going, well, I'm white, I'm white, I'm white, I'm black, I'm black, I'm black, you're brown, you're brown, you're brown. And he's like, why are they focusing? Like, it literally is when we're separating ourselves by race, like doing that. Oh, well, I'm going to decorate my house in all yellow paintings, and I don't care what the content of the paintings is as long as it's yellow. Like, that's the important thing, is that it's yellow. I'm going, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And, God has made this incredible, if he wanted us all to be white or if he wanted us all to be black, he would have made us that way. But yet he's put this incredible diverse group of people that not only have different skin colors, but different hair types and eye color and, and content of character, which actually makes us beautiful. Right. And yet all we want to do is be like, only blue painting, like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So, we, in that passage, it's talking about, loving others, like being gracious, having the same mind with one another, but to not to not cancel each other. Like, but so how do we? And this is this could take maybe the remaining part of our time, but how do we, as followers of Jesus, how do we keep from making enemies out of people who don't agree with us, right? So we're supposed to bless, right? So the Bible tells us, bless those that curse you. In the text in 1 Peter, it says to bless, right? To the people who are not like you, to go ahead and bless them. Like, what does that look like? And how do we do that when somebody seems to be so opposed or against what we are for?
Well, and I don't know if you feel like this. I feel like that is almost split into two different things of how do I do that as a person and how do we do that as a church? Because I don't know if you feel that way. Like, I feel that where like organizationally is different than personally.
Right.
So I don't know if you've been at this longer than I have organizationally. But personally, I always think it's easier to do personally because, you know, my friend Dave or my friend John, you know, like I know them and we both like the Royals and we, you know, like our kids play together. And so it's easier for me to go, oh, you think that? I don't like, you know, you like chicken, I like steak, you know, like, but, and as long as we're not buying into the exterior of it, where it's like, okay, you and I have different political beliefs on this issue. And I go, well, that makes you a bad person. Like you're evil. And we talked a little bit about that this Sunday of going, it's not, people aren't necessarily evil. There are ideologies that are evil and there are evil actions, but most people are lost souls and they're made in the image of God and their children. So I think the way that you perceive somebody personally, you know, it's easy to look at, you know, if you are right wing and you go, well, those Antifa kids, you should just gun them down because they're attacking a police station. Or if you're left wing and you're like, well, those, you know, Proud Boys should be locked up, or the January 6th people are like, and I'm going, but if you knew that person personally, or like Chris and I were just watching a TV show where there was a detective, and the first thing that happens is he goes, oh yeah, I got a call from an old friend, and then he goes downtown, and that person's daughter had been, you know, suicided off a roof, and it's like, and then you see the change in him. The cops are coming around. Oh, he had somebody come, you know, like she's probably on drugs, and then he finds out who it is, and then it's like, hey guys, stop talking like that, and it changes the mentality that you approach people with. But I don't like, what have you guys done either personally or organizationally? How do you feel like we do that as a church?
So let me tap in first, like personally, how it's affected, I think, everyone on a personal level is in years past throughout our history, there has always been, you know, Republicans, Democrats, independents, different political persuasions, different, even different theological or, you know, beliefs that in our culture. Like that is not new. Mm-hmm. But in years past, like for pretty much the history of our country, you could be a Democrat, I could be a Republican, and you could have an opinion that I don't agree with, and we could have debates and conversations.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, I could look at you as a person and say, though I don't agree with you, I value you, and I can be your friend. And we might have to make some choices along the way to say, hey, we're going to like not go too deep into this conversation because we tend to get a little heated, but we're going to enjoy one another.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore. And it seems like it changed during COVID, where if you're Democrat and I'm Republican, then you're canceled, right? So I'm unfriending you on Facebook. I can't even have you a part of my life because you are so bad. And it went kind of both ways. So on a personal level,
politicians in the media feel like they feel that.
And so because of the instant access we have to all of media, I think it just heightened that divisiveness and pushed people away. And so, yeah, I don't have a great answer of how to approach that on a personal level because everyone is so polarized, and probably me included. You know, it's you're passionate and trying to navigate through that.
it's hard to stay informed about what's happening politically in our country and not be fed hatred or by whoever's broadcasting this. It's like part of it I'm like, I just want to listen to or watch print media because at least then you can kind of siphon through it. But I'm just sitting there going, it's so hard to be kept up to speed and not take a stance on it, if that makes sense, and not
Yep.
again go, well, these people, it's like what I said about my mom, like, these people are idiots, and like, no.
Yeah.
And when that person is your neighbor, you hurt for them and you go,
Right.
oh my gosh, what are they going through? And trying to have that, I think what Peter says here, which is sympathy. But I love what he says here, where he says, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. I'm like going, how many of those times are we just just spewing hatred and lies about and putting up false dichotomies of like, well, either you believe what I believe or you're a Satanist, and it's like, no.
No.
Like, people are trying to struggle through. But I also think there's just been a shift in our culture where I think a lot of, especially, I'll speak for like men, it used to be men were like, we don't show emotion, like, this is what we do. And now there's this extreme thing where it's like, whatever you are experiencing emotionally is reality. And I'm like, we have to come
there's-
somewhere else.
Yeah, there's somewhere in the middle. So those personal relationships, it's painful.
Yeah.
Like from an organizational perspective. So as a church, how we approach topics now and people now is the same that we always have,
Yeah.
which is we live in a very sinful and broken world, and no one is perfect. And our heart as a church is to reach people who are lost, hurting, broken, people who have hurts, habits, hang-ups, some people that are far, far away from God, and we want to bring them into a relationship with God, and other people who know God but have drifted away from God. We want to get them back.
Yeah.
Right. So we have a heart for people who have a passion to worship God, as well as those who really don't have a lot of interest in God, but they know that something's wrong. Right. And so with that understanding, we know that there will be people of all walks of life and all different beliefs, and we're okay with that. And so when somebody comes into our church family and they are a drug addict, we love them and we welcome them in. And we can say to them, you are part of our family. And we want to go on this journey with you to recovery, to help you get healthy, to help you see God's plan for your life, how he created you and what he wants for you. And there will be sermons that we preach that will address addictions or dependency on something other than God.
Right.
Somebody comes in with an alcohol problem. We do that. An anger problem, same thing.
Yeah.
Somebody who comes in that says, I'm same-sex attracted, or, I think I'm lesbian. Or maybe even they say, I am a lesbian, I'm gay, I'm a homosexual. We love you.
Yeah.
You are welcome to be here. And the same message is given to them in that we want to journey with you and help you understand how God created you. And that's where it's become the problem now.
Yeah, and I think I want to commend our church, like not just the pastors, but the volunteers and just our church family and the way they accept people and bring people. I think we are a church that is rare in the fact that we focus on the long term. Like I said, we talk about that in Freedom, where somebody will come and they'll be like, man, I fell off the wagon, I took drugs again. And we're like, okay, but you're here. Like, let's keep working. Like, it's okay. You're going to sin again in your life. And I'm going, it's not necessarily like we're like, oh, you have to be a perfect person to come here. And I think that churches, like, you have to play the long game with people. It's not like, hey, like, people will come in and say, I need financial assistance. And then if you just give them money, sometimes they blow it. And you're like, I can't believe they did it. I'm like, well, of course they'll do that. That's why they're here.
That's why they're broke.
Yeah, if they're not, if they're not financially responsible, that's why they need financial assistance. And so it's a different journey to teach that person financial, independence over a long period of time than to hand them $50 and wish them good luck. Like, that's a different mentality. And like, even when you're talking about same-sex attracted, things like that, I think we have lost this as a church, is the idea that we are to become more Christ-like. It's not that Christ is supposed to affirm us where we are at, is that we are supposed, like the Bible talks about dying to the old man, stripping your flesh, taming your flesh. Everything that you have as a fleshly desire, whether it's eating, drinking, drugs, sexual desires, those things are supposed to be conformed to the image of Christ, not that Christ. And it's crazy that you said, like, oh yeah, we believed the same thing the whole time, but somehow now all of a sudden it's controversial.
Yeah. And so you mentioned on Sunday in your message the encounter that Jesus had with this woman at the well.
Right.
And in her brokenness, in her sinfulness, Jesus still loved her and spoke to her and brought her in. But he didn't celebrate her brokenness. He didn't celebrate all of her past relationships. He acknowledged them,
Right.
and loved her and said, now, okay, let's go on this journey forward into my image, into the likeness of me, the way I created you. And they moved forward. And that's our heart. And it's getting more and more difficult to do that on a daily basis.
Well, I think what's crazy, and that's the difference between cancel culture, is cancel culture is very immediate. You know, you stepped out of line, I punish you, and you're either excommunicated or you have to go through the mea culpa. And this other process is so much longer and loving. And I think it's funny in the Bible that it doesn't say that that woman then went home and married her boyfriend. It doesn't say she went back to her other husband. Like when Jesus gets the rich young ruler, it says the rich young ruler went away sad, but it doesn't say whether or not he sold everything and followed him. And even the woman who's caught in adultery, that they throw her before the feet of Jesus. And Jesus in that moment is basically saying not to slut shame people. You know, like you're not going, like we're not going to throw you and expose you and do that. Like that's bad. But then he tells her, go and sin no more. And it doesn't tell you whether or not, like how she lives her life, but he gives her that command to call her out of that. And so you have that same thing of a firmness of what is, like he doesn't look at her and go, he doesn't look at everybody else and go, you know, really the sexual revolution needs to happen. And really this woman should be able to sleep with a number of people and try on partners. Like there's none of that. It's traditional morals. And yet I'm going to walk you through this because I love you.
Yeah. So the last 2 minutes of our time, practical ways that we as followers of Christ can be a blessing. What are some things that we can do in a very practical way to say, I want to bless you?
Right. I think a very practical thing is the way we speak. In 1 Peter, it talks about don't have a deceitful tongue, don't let evil come from your tongue. James talks about your tongue as well. Try not to speak things over people that is damaging. So even if somebody comes to you and they're like, you're a jerk and I hate you, be like, you know, I bless you in the name of Jesus and I see you as God's child who's lost. You know, your own children, don't make statement. Like we try and, you know, make statements like that, not over our children where it's like, you know, I think that you're going to get this, you know, like I know you're struggling right now, but I believe you're going to get this, and speak positively over people to bless them. What about you? What do you think?
You know, words are big. And again, because language is changing, it's hard to say the right thing, and people are afraid of saying the wrong thing. And if you have an opinion, you know, you have to kind of be careful of how
to hedge it.
Yeah. But yeah, words are an important part of that. I think one of the ways that to be a blessing is to be available. I mean, just to say, hey, I know where you are right now.
Or to ask where they're at right now. Ask them their story.
And I'm here. Like, I'm not leaving you. Like, I'm here. If you want something, just reach out. We can go on this journey together. I don't hate you. I disagree with you, but I want to bless you. I do want what's best for you. And that's why I'm doing this, because I care.
Yeah, right? We just disagree about what's best for you.
Yeah, and again, that becomes a bit of a challenge because everything is so polarizing now.
And wrapped in your identity, like you were talking about last week.
And so if I don't celebrate you, then I'm bigoted towards you, or you know, I'm hateful towards you. And so it does become more and more challenging. So 1 minute, last thought. What do you got?
Be kind, be gentle of spirit with people. You know, like I said, and you know, you're going to talk to people and just be loving and caring towards them.
Perfect. Hey, thanks for joining us here on the 167. That wraps up this session. So thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.